Pero los días que lo mató, los voy a matar a todos los hijos. Yo solo los mato los malparidos.
Juan Pablo Escobar, otherwise known as Sebastian Marroquin, was only 16 when his father was gunned down on a rooftop in Medellin, Colombia. But his father wasn't the average dad. He was Pablo Escobar, the DEA's most wanted man, a notorious kingpin that the American and Colombian authorities had been chasing for almost 2 decades. But to his son, Juan Pablo, things weren't that one-sided.
When I was 7 years old, he told me after he killed the minister, and when we went to Panama, he told me that he was a bandit. So a man who gives you love every day tells you he's a bandit, it's difficult to judge him.
Had Pablo Escobar not died that day, would his son have become his right-hand man? And what did he do after Escobar was gunned down? Let's explore Juan Pablo Escobar's attitude towards his father's betrayers and his life after Pablo Escobar. To everyone who knew him, Pablo Escobar was a feared lord. At the peak of his criminal career, he made $140 million in cash every day. And he did so by butchering anyone who stood in his way, even people he thought might stand in his way. And sometimes he killed their families too. Pablo Escobar grew up very poor. Dreaming of quick cash and seeing no hope in school, he began a life of petty crime. It soon progressed from stealing tombstones to commercial business robbery. Then, Pablo got a penchant for violence. He offered protection for money, gave loans, and of course, beat or killed anyone who refused to pay. Then he started kidnapping rich politicians for ransom money. After he got a $50,000 ransom for politician and philanthropist Diego Echeverria, he killed him anyway. Then came the infamous Medellin cartel. During the 1970s and 80s, Pablo Escobar's cartel was so successful that it was the single reason for the white powder addiction epidemic in the US. Needless to say, this put him very high up on the DEA's most wanted list. But the more authorities closed in on arresting and extraditing him, the more paranoid he got, and the more violent his reactions. In 1989, he brought down a civilian plane, killing 110 people just because he believed an enemy politician was on board. He canceled the flight at the last minute, and all those people paid with their lives for Pablo's error. And on January 30th, 1993, he attempted to assassinate the head of the Colombian security office with a car bomb. Once again, the mission failed, as the target wasn't hit, but 21 civilians were killed and dozens were maimed. What's even worse, most of them were children waiting for the school bus.
When I arrived in Medellin, I saw that it was a beautiful place. It was a progressive city, a lot of skyscrapers, a lot of construction. But once I was there for a month, I started to see bodies throughout Medellin, and it was at that time known as the murder capital of Colombia.
To everyone who knew him, Pablo Escobar was a terrifying lord, a psychopathic killer, and a ruthless businessman. But not to his son. To Juan, Pablo Escobar was a loving father.
I was willing to give my life for him. That's how deeply I love him.
Juan Pablo Escobar was born on February 24th, 1977, right around the time Escobar had become one of the richest men in the world. But believe it or not, Juan Pablo had no idea just how ruthless and violent his father was until very late in his teenage years, because Pablo worked very hard to shelter him and make him see his point of view.
When you were enjoying the riches of your family, did that make you feel that your father's work, his criminal work, was okay?
No, because I didn't know exactly what he does.
As he grew up, Juan began to pick up ideas here and there. Sometimes this was unavoidable. The whole family would have to pack up and leave the country after Pablo would murder a public figure. But even then, Pablo wrapped his dark affairs in gold leaf for his kids.
He was telling me, when I was 7 years old, he told me after he killed the minister, and when we went to Panama, he told me that he was a bandit. So a man who gives you love every day tells you he's a bandit, it's difficult to judge him.
And what does bandit mean to a 7-year-old really? It could be a petty thief or someone who jaywalks, for all the kid knows. Of course, Pablo wasn't going to tell his son that he would butcher the wives and children of judges who threatened to arrest him. Interestingly enough, Juan Pablo didn't judge his father even after he grew up and found out the true reality of his crimes. Not even after Pablo condemned him to a life on the run.
Considering the life he gave you, the life on the run, the threats to your life, the poverty eventually, is there a part of you that also hates him?
No, there's no chance I could hate my father.
Put yourself in Juan Pablo's position. Would you hate your father if you knew he had done some horrible things? Or would his love and endless list of expensive gifts for you outshadow his criminal record?
Before this, before you really knew, what kind of father was he?
Well, he was...
as far back as you can remember.
Well, I remember him giving me a lot of love, being at home with me and my family. He was a very good man with me. I received a lot of love from him. That's what I remember.
And here's the catch. To the poor people of Colombia, Pablo Escobar was also seen as a hero. Ever since he would kidnap rich politicians for ransom money, he was seen as a Robin Hood figure, someone who steals from the rich and gives to the poor.
I also remember when we went to see the poor villages in Colombia to help them. And that's the father that I knew at the beginning. But of course, he's now more remembered thanks to his violence, not for his good behavior at the beginning.
Pablo Escobar built football pitches, restaurants, hospitals, even an entire neighborhood to house the homeless people in Medellin. Pablo Escobar was a bag of mixed messages for his son. There was another problem. Pablo enjoyed violence and was proud of his life. So even though he tried to shelter his son from his criminal life, he couldn't help but reveal his actions.
Did your father ever express any regret?
And I don't think he expressed any regret at all
About anything?
about anything. He thought he was doing the right thing.
Pablo might have tried to keep his business hush-hush at home, but his propensity for violence and his maniac desire to win would show even in the living room.
You call him a bad loser too.
Well, he didn't want to lose. He was always cheating, even to me or to my mom, to everybody. He didn't want to lose at all. When he played soccer, the game only ends when he was winning, and that's it.
To his son, Pablo was like a little kid sometimes.
And what if you played a board game or you had some? Would he
Well,
cheat?
we
play
used to
cards?
play Monopoly, and yes, he hid all the money and everything. And even if he lose a lot, he was always winning, and I didn't know why, but he was making a lot of. He was cheating a lot.
As a child, Juan Pablo got over 30 motorcycles from his dad. He and his sister were showered in expensive gifts and lived on the most luxurious ranch in the country. They had their own private zoo, pools, and anything they requested. But after Pablo's death in 1993, Juan, Manuela, and their mother, Maria Victoria, would suffer a complete 180 in their lives. Whoever your parents are, they're the ones who teach you about the world from their perspective. If they teach you murder is okay, you might begin to think that too. Many kingpin children enter the illicit business world as their parents' right-hand person. But luckily for Juan Pablo, he never entered his father's world. He was 16 years old in December 1993 when Pablo Escobar fell to his death on the roof of his aunt's Medellin house after his famous last encounter with the DEA.
When Pablo Escobar was killed on that rooftop, the very first message transferred over the radio was, "Viva Colombia! Matamos a Pablo Escobar! Long live Colombia! We've just killed Pablo Escobar."
Lord Pablo Escobar was killed today, 16 months after his escape from prison.
Only then did Juan Pablo realize the full extent of Escobar's horrific crimes. Pablo Escobar had been on the run for 16 months when he died. His whole family, Maria Victoria, Manuela, and Juan Pablo, were already under police supervision. In fact, it was Pablo's call to his son on December 2nd that got him tracked and shot down. So Juan Pablo and his family were with the police when they received the news. His father was dead. His first reaction was to threaten to kill those who killed his father.
Pero si el que lo mató lo pueda matar a todos los hijos. Yo solo los mato los malparidos.
But he didn't really mean those words. He'd never laid a finger on anyone, and he wasn't going to start now. In fact, throughout his adolescence, he tried many times to convince his dad not to attack civilians anymore. Juan Pablo's anger lasted a mere 10 minutes.
In that moment, did you want to kill everyone?
Yeah, in that moment, yes. The 10 first minutes, yes. And that's why 10 minutes after that, I called the press and I tell that I will never do anything to continue my father's steps. And that's the second threat, peace. And that's the only one that I've been living every day since then.
Juan Pablo was especially wise for a 16-year-old. What did he do to those who betrayed his father? Nothing. He understood that violence only leads to more violence, and that Pablo had died because of all the pain he'd caused in the past. But then, Juan Pablo felt betrayed by the authorities again. As soon as Escobar was taken down, Juan Pablo, Manuela, and Maria lost all their assets to rival cartels. Whatever was left was seized by the authorities. They were poor and homeless, even though their father still had barrels full of cash buried underground. And when they tried to flee from Colombia, no one would sell them plane tickets. United Nations didn't want to help the Escobars either.
Your name these days is Sebastian Marroquin.
Yes.
Is that because the Escobar name is too much to carry?
It is because the airlines didn't want to sell any plane tickets to travel and to get away from violence, you know.
Juan Pablo and his family were facing death threats every single day. They had to stay in a hotel room and pay bodyguards to protect them from the people flooding the corridors. But without any money left, they couldn't afford the hotel room or the bodyguards anymore. That's when they changed their names and fled to Argentina.
We stayed in Colombia for a year, waiting for somebody to help us.
After your father died?
After my father's death, and we asked the Vatican, the United Nations, and nobody wanted to help us. So it was our last option if we wanted to stay alive.
So that was when you could leave the country with your mother and your family?
The next day we changed our names. We could fly without any problems.
Now, they were the Marroquin family, and Juan Pablo took the name Sebastian.
We changed our identities. It was the only way. When we changed our names, the next day we were free.
But it was no easy feat for the Marroquins to stay out of trouble, even though none of them had ever broken the law. Sebastian was arrested for money laundering, kidnapping, and blackmailing. He'd done none of these things. He was just being arrested for being his father's son. In 1999, the family was arrested for Pablo Escobar's crimes, although they were soon released. This sent Manuela, now using the name Joana, into extreme bouts of anxiety and depression. Sadly, she has even tried to take her life. Today, she lives with her brother for her own health and safety. Sebastian and Joana lived in poverty for decades, something they'd never experienced before. Ironically, their father had tried desperately to escape his poverty. His main motivation was to make ever more money and prove to the world that he wasn't the poor farmer's boy he once was. He claimed he did all he did to provide for his children, but when the children were left without a father, they lost everything. This is what you get when you make your money from a life of crime. But Sebastian and Joana paid for their father's, not their own, crimes. Slowly, Sebastian got on his feet. He became an architect and a lecturer, and now lives and works in Argentina. He now spreads the word about living in Pablo Escobar's shadow and about his father's crimes. He warns people not to idolize him. Before he was a famous kingpin, he was a ruthless criminal.
How many murders is he directly or indirectly responsible for?
Well, there is not an official record of that, but I believe that it is almost about 3,000 people.
So what did Sebastian do about all those who betrayed him or his father? Not only did he not retaliate, he works hard to seek forgiveness from all the families of all those killed by Pablo Escobar. Sebastian, or Juan Pablo, fought the urge for revenge with peace and love. Imagine how much strength this takes from someone who grew up under the same roof as Pablo Escobar. Today, Juan Pablo doesn't go by Sebastian anymore.
You talk about the greatest prize being anonymity. Why have you given that up?
No, I'm no longer hiding because I don't want to hide. I didn't kill anybody. I didn't do any harm to anybody. I'm not proud of his violence, but I am proud of his love for me, to me and to my mother and sister. And everybody's right if they want to love him, because he made some things that make you love him and some things that make you hate him. That's my father.
Perhaps Juan Pablo offers a valuable lesson to all children of cartel members and drug lords. You don't have to follow in your parents' footsteps. Choose love over hate and forgiveness over revenge. Hey, thanks for watching. Do you think Juan Pablo would have become a nasty lord like his father if Pablo had not been killed in 1993? As always, let me know your thoughts in the comments section. And before you go, don't forget to like and subscribe. And why not hit that bell so you never miss another episode? See you next time.